If you drove through a small town just outside Tampa about 50 years ago, you might have seen something a little unusual. Not just weird Florida unusual. I'm talking about Ferris wheels in people's yards, elephants living next door, and circus performers walking around town like it's totally normal. And the wild part, this wasn't a theme park. This was a real town where people lived. Hi, my name's Alyssa, and I'm a local resident and realtor to Tampa, and I absolutely love sharing with you about the city and all the amazing things it has to offer for both those of you who already live here and for those of you still trying to decide whether or not Tampa is your next move. If you find this fun and helpful, be sure to hit the bell so you get notified when I post new videos. And if you are thinking about making a move to Tampa, be sure to click the link below to download my relocation guide or set up a time for us to talk one-on-one. Just about 12 miles south of Tampa is a place called Gibsonton, better known as Gibtown, and for decades it was considered the winter home of America's circus and carnival industry. Thousands of performers, ride operators, and sideshow acts spent their off-season here, which means this quiet little town near Tampa once had giants, sword swallowers, tattooed performers, and famous sideshow acts living side by side with regular families. And the story of how that happened is honestly one of the strangest pieces of Tampa Bay history. To understand how Gibsonton became Circus Central, we have to go back to the early 1900s. Back then, traveling circuses and carnivals were huge entertainment across the United States. Before television, before the internet, before streaming, when a circus came to town, it was the event. People would come from miles away to see animals, acrobats, sideshow performers, and massive traveling shows. But these circuses had a big logistical problem. They traveled most of the year, but during the winter months, they needed a place to store equipment, train animals, repair rides, and regroup before the next season. Florida turned out to be the perfect place. The weather was warm year-round, land was cheap, and there was plenty of space. So over time, several major circus operations set up winter headquarters in Florida. The Ringling Brothers Circus, for example, made Sarasota famous as a circus town. But while Sarasota became the headquarters for the big shows, a lot of carnival workers and sideshow performers ended up settling just outside Tampa. And that place was Gibsonton. By the 1930s and 40s, Gibsonton started attracting circus and carnival workers looking for somewhere to live during the off-season. And it actually made a lot of sense. The town was close to Tampa, but still rural and inexpensive. It sat along the Alyssa River, which made it easy for carnival equipment and rides to be transported by water. And most importantly, it was a place where people didn't judge. Many circus performers lived unusual lifestyles or had physical differences that made them stand out in other communities. But in Gibsonton, nobody really cared. If anything, it became a place where people could finally feel normal. And as more performers moved there, the town slowly started transforming into something completely unique. By the 1960s, it was estimated that around 1,000 carnival workers and roughly 100 sideshow performers lived in Gibsonton, which earned it nicknames like Carnival Capital of America and Showtown USA. Now here's where the story gets really weird because Gibsonton didn't just have circus people living there. The entire town actually adapted to circus life. Local zoning laws were changed to accommodate the unique needs of carnival workers, which meant residents could legally do things that would be pretty shocking in most neighborhoods. For example, people could keep elephants, monkeys, and other circus animals on their property. Carnival rides like Ferris wheels and trailers could be parked in people's yards. And many performers lived in travel trailers year-round, just like they did on the road. So imagine living in a quiet Florida town and your neighbor has a Ferris wheel next to their garage. That was completely normal in Gibsonton. Because the town attracted so many performers, some of the most famous sideshow acts in America ended up living there. One of them was Priscilla the Monkey Girl, a well-known circus performer who had a rare condition that caused her face to be covered in hair. She lived in Gibsonton with her husband, who was known as Emmett the Alligator-Skinned Man. Another famous resident was Grady Stiles, better known as Lobster Boy, who had a condition that caused his hands to resemble lobster claws. Then, of course, there were also giants, sword swallowers, bearded ladies, tattoo performers, and countless other acts who spent their winters in this little Tampa area town. But one couple in particular became the most beloved residents. One of the most famous couples in Gibsonton history was Al and Jeannie Tomaini. Al Tomaini was known in the circus world as the Giant, and he stood about 8 feet tall. His wife Jeannie was a performer known as the Half Woman. She was around 2.5 feet tall. Together, they were a huge attraction in the sideshow world. But when they settled in Gibsonton, they became something else entirely. They became community leaders. Al actually served as the town's police chief and fire chief, while Jeannie worked as the postmistress. So imagine walking into your local post office and being greeted by a world-famous circus performer. In Gibsonton, that was just everyday life. Over time, the circus industry began to change. Sideshow acts became less common, traveling carnivals evolved, and entertainment shifted towards television and theme parks. Many of the performers who made Gibsonton famous eventually retired or passed away, and little by little, the town started to look more like a typical Florida community. But the circus industry never fully left. Even today, Gibsonton still has strong ties to the carnival world. Many carnival families still live in the area, and one of the biggest reminders of that history is a place you can still visit today. Right here in the Gibsonton area is the International Independent Showmen's Museum. The museum preserves the history of traveling circuses and carnivals with artifacts, costumes, equipment, and photos from the golden age of the industry. It's run by people who were actually part of the carnival world, which means it's not just a museum, it's a living piece of history. And every year, one of the biggest carnival industry trade shows in the country still happens right here. So while the days of elephants in backyards and Ferris wheels in front lawns may be honestly mostly gone, the circus legacy of this tiny town just outside Tampa is still very much alive. Tampa Bay has a lot of strange and fascinating history. Pirates, gangsters, cigar factories, bootlegging. But a small town where circus performers built an entire community, that might be one of the most bizarre stories of them all. So next time you're driving south of Tampa and pass through Gibsonton, just remember, you're driving through what was once the winter home of America's circus world. And decades ago, seeing a Ferris wheel in someone's yard wasn't weird at all. It was just another day in Showtown USA.